Hey, what is up, wrestling friends and family? It's me, JB, the best Chris in all of wrestling podcast, Mr. Chris Dredd. And do we have a treat for you? Chris, you can already tell that I sound like hell, so please bring this legend in.
Honestly, friend of the show, multiple time guest, and we spoke about this off camera, and we will probably say our favorite wrestling journalist. We have the man, the legend, the host of Shut Up and Wrestle podcast. You were also the other Brian on the at one point of the Jim Cornette experience, I remember. Multiple time author of books that you would have heard of: the Blood and Fire, the real life story of wrestling's original Sheik, WWE Legends, Pro Wrestling Frequently Asked Questions, and also Godzilla Frequently Asked Questions, World Wrestling Entertainment trivia book, and also worked on the WWE magazine for many years. Our friend, he's on speaking with us today about the Irresistible Force, the life and times of Gorilla Monsoon. Our friend, the man, Brian R. Solomon. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing okay. You could also call me Brian second to last.
That's right.
That's the other name that I know. Thank you, guys. Boy, it's a pleasure to be here again. I love talking to you guys, and I have a whole new book to talk about this time. It's great.
Fantastic. And again, we've got to get it in there. Fantastically written, well researched, and you can just tell that you just love doing what you're doing when you do it so well. So we're not blowing smoke. You are our favorite wrestling author, and it's always a pleasure to have you on, man. So I mean, where do we really start? I mean, for guys sort of my age, JB's age, I'm not sure. I mean, you might be around my age, Brian. I'm like 43 in a week or so. You might
50.
be a bit older. Yeah, so you're a bit older than me. So for guys sort of myself and Jordan's age, and maybe your age as well, when we think about Gorilla Monsoon, like, we're of the sort of slightly younger generation that won't necessarily remember him wrestling too much. But
Right.
for us, Gorilla Monsoon was like the voice of wrestling. He was that personality. So many things that he said, and in various partnerships that he had with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Jesse the Body Ventura. He was the voice of our sort of childhood and us growing up sort of watching wrestling. But not many people our age will sort of remember him as a wrestler. So it's very interesting. This is a fantastic book for sort of our generation specifically. I would say everyone needs to just go out and get it, because he was a lot more. I mean, he was fantastic behind the scenes. There's a lot of stuff that he did. The specific gorilla position is named after him.
Yes.
So he was integral to the wrestling business, and he was well respected, and he respected the business and the way that it was run, and the working parts of it. But what can you say about Gorilla Monsoon? I mean, we like I say, we've read the book, we love the book. We don't want to sort of go too much into it because obviously it's out in the UK beginning of November. So we don't want to give too much away, but obviously there's a few
That's
sort
okay.
of
You won't.
things.
There's no way to give too much away. The book is huge.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, okay, that's good. Because there's a few
fine.
things we want to talk about. We're pulling a few out, so obviously we can't go over it all. But why did you write this book? What made you want to sort of get into Gorilla Monsoon and his life and what he did?
Well, the big reason was that no one had done it. That was one of the reasons, and I couldn't understand why. It was kind of shocking. Even his family was surprised. Documentaries, magazines, books, nothing like that. And, a lot of time has passed now. And this is somebody who is crucially important to the history of what is now the biggest wrestling company on the planet, the biggest wrestling company in the history of the business. And he used to own a quarter of it. You know what I mean? Like, he's a very important person that people need to know more about. Like you said, he's mainly known as the commentator and the WWF president for a couple of years. And that's fine. That's his most high profile stuff. And it was when he was in front of a national and then global audience. But there's so much more to him. And I don't even just mean the wrestling career, which, you only knew about if you grew up in the Northeast of the United States and you were a fan of a certain age. He was a legend for that too. But even just behind the scenes and the level of power and respect that he had and his work as a promoter and the people that he discovered and helped, there was so much to this story. I mean, he was the perfect candidate.
It's crazy, like you say, that no one has really done any sort of delving into or biography of his life. Why do you think that is? Maybe was it just sort of the era that he was in, and then sort of the more prominence of people writing books about people? Do you think it was just a generational thing, or?
I think part of it was, he fell into this weird gap. So I think in his own lifetime, he probably was hesitant to do things like that. I don't think he really wanted that. If you notice, like Captain Lou Albano got a Coliseum videotape. He got a special magazine. Blassie got a book right before he died. And I think in his lifetime, Gorilla didn't want those kinds of things. And I think after he passed, it might be them, respecting those wishes. I don't think so. I think as time goes by, people just, names fade and other things come up, and you kind of dwell on the present. And I also think, when Bruno Sammartino came back to the company in 2013, they started focusing everything on him, because he was right there, present again in the company. They started doing things with him. They did a DVD on Madison Square Garden. They had him in all the documentaries. He went in the Hall of Fame. And ironically, he's mentioned more today than Gorilla Monsoon, who was the one who was, loyal to the company for like 30, 40 years. So, I think it's just the passage of time.
Well, I mean, if you want to go back, Gorilla Monsoon had a big period being a heel against Bruno Sammartino, right? For a while back there.
Yeah, he was. That's how he first came in.
Yeah.
And in fact, I grew up in the Northeast. I'm too young for that, but I knew, when you grow up in this area and you have older relatives and fans who've been watching a long time, I definitely had an awareness that he had been a big deal and he had been this big monster heel. And they would even, another way I would learn it too, is they would put some of his matches and things on the Coliseum videos. So I was able to kind of get a hint at that. But, here he was for a few years in the 60s, like say 63 to 68, 69. He was one of the top heels in the wrestling business, and one of the top drawing heels, especially. And even if you just accounted for the Northeast, but he also went to California, spent some time out there doing it. And him and Bruno, they feuded up and down the East Coast and the Northeast. And he was Bruno's first real major opponent. They had 7 main events at Madison Square Garden between 1963 and 1967. And that's not including, Boston Garden, Philadelphia Spectrum. They had a big match at Roosevelt Stadium, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, you name it, Rhode Island, just up and down, Pittsburgh, the whole Northeast corridor. And, Gorilla challenged Bruno more times than any other challenger for the world title. And he was the WWF's first monster heel, really.
Crazy. That's I mean, again, because people are not too familiar with his sort of maybe wrestling work, people of a certain generation, it's fantastic to sort of delve into that and see, because you can do digging. I mean, I watched we're always digging because we're like a retro wrestling podcast anyway. So, it might be sort of 43, but I'll sit there and watch a 1969 Gorilla Monsoon versus Giant Baba from Japan match, or Gorilla Monsoon in a boxing match against Andre the Giant, like this sort of stuff. And, this is why we love it, just delving back and that sort of stuff. I mean, for a big guy as well in that era, the big guys really didn't move that well, but Gino could move, right? When he was in the ring, he could go.
Yeah, especially in those early years. It's very unfair that most of the footage we have is from later in his career, where he wasn't as mobile. He gained a lot of weight. He gained close to 100 pounds. at one point, and he was getting older. Look, when you're that big, you age faster, and so like by the time he was 40, he was just kind of done. He was really winding down, and he was diagnosed with diabetes in his late 30s. He also stopped, what I write about in the book there, he stopped wearing contact lenses. He used to wrestle with contact lenses in, and then he stopped for various reasons, and his style changed. But he was known for being an incredibly athletic and agile big man, say in his 20s and early 30s. That's why they liked him so much. And you see a little bit in those Japanese matches, like you talked about, how he does that big man bump over the top rope. He's doing splits. He could do cartwheels, drop kicks. He can go outside the ring. It's kind of like you hear that about Andre the Giant in his very early years, and you can't even believe it, but it's true. And Gorilla was kind of like that too. That was partly why he was so valued, because he was so huge and scary, but he wasn't just like a lump. He didn't just stand there like a lot of the big guys did. He really worked. He was a good worker in the 60s, especially.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible watching him in the Japanese match against Bubba, where they're just sort of having this sort of face off, and he just jumps up in the air, does the splits, and touches his toes with his hands.
Crazy. It's
crazy.
crazy.
Like, I mean, how old would he been then in 69? He would have been sort of what, late 30s, no, or mid 30s?
He would have been about 32.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, he was a big dude, right? He was a big guy, and even by 32, he'd probably put on a little bit of weight.
By 69, he was definitely around the 400-pound mark. Like when he first came into the WWF in 63, he was probably closer to 375. And then
is that like kayfabe weight, or is that like legit?
No, that's legit weight. And he, in fact, his measurements were pretty legit. He was legit 6'6". He was legit hovering around that 400-pound mark, 375. I think he got as big as 440 in the 70s, and that was not good. I mean, it was just even at his size, that's bad news. He was huge.
JB, what you saying? I know JB's not feeling great, but I'm sure he's got something to jump in.
I do. My stuff is more to do with a little bit further on, like in his career, when he gets in, when he does get into the commentary booth, and again, we don't want to spoil too much about the book, but you get to meet Bobby the Brain Heenan. So, and that's it was at WrestleMania 17, right?
Yeah, the gimmick battle royal
company. Yeah. So
is that when they sort of when Mean Gene Oakland and Bobby got caught with Moolah and that in the back?
No, that was WrestleMania 20.
Oh, was that 20? That was 20.
That wasn't 17. Am I mixing them up? Well, I was.
It was 17. Yeah.
No, 17. Heenan does commentary with Mean Gene, doesn't he? But no, at WrestleMania 20, they get caught in somewhere in Madison Square Garden with Moolah.
Right.
And Nash.
Okay.
I forgot that. I forgot they were at 20. Yeah.
But sorry.
Right. Because that's the year. 2004 is the year that Bobby went in the Hall of Fame.
Right,
so
that's right.
That would make sense that he would have been around. Yeah.
I mean, Bobby the Brain Heenan is royalty on this podcast. He is absolute royalty on this podcast.
I think he was the greatest manager of all time.
Oh, I mean, you've said it right there. I mean, what what can you say about Bobby? Bobby and Gorilla together were like the odd couple. They were, but they were real good friends. I still remember Gorilla chucking Bobby out of Raw in sort of 93, 94 sort of time, was it?
Yeah, 93.
Fantastic stuff, man. Bobby was great.
That was Bobby's idea to do that. He wanted to go out that way. He wanted Gorilla to be the one to do it. That was something they came up with.
Crazy. There's a story from that Bobby tells on like a shoot interview that he did about the fruit basket in the hotel room and stuff, and he and then they end up just sort of crying and talking and that in the hotel room for hours after. I mean, they were real good friends, right?
Yeah, and that story's in the book too. They were the best of friends. They really truly were. I mean, even talking to their families and stuff, they were the absolute best of friends. They loved each other. And Bob, people talk about how Gorilla was destroyed when he lost his son Joey. And Bobby was destroyed when he lost Gorilla. Bobby was, I think that haunted him for the rest of his life. They really were the best of friends.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that shone through when he spoke about Gorilla on, I think it was Nitro, wasn't it?
Yes.
Like, yeah, they did that. Yeah, they did the Nitro. Like he did the, yeah, it really came through. Like you could see that Bobby was struggling.
Yeah, it was this very real moment that you don't usually get on a wrestling broadcast. You know, it was genuine emotion. And I think part of it was also Bobby being upset at how it was being handled by the company. And that really created a situation where Bobby never forgot about it. He never forgave Tony Schiavone. He had an axe to grind with Schiavone for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I mean, so speak more about that, about what happened with Schiavone and the whole Gorilla thing.
Well, you know, when Gorilla passed away in October '99, of course, Bobby Heenan was in WCW, and he'd been there for a long time. He'd been there like almost 6 years, and in fact, yeah, really long time. And he wanted to do something for Gorilla on television, do a tribute, do something nice, and the company wasn't thrilled about that. And Tony Schiavone, which ironically, you know, Tony had worked in the WWF for a year, 89 to 90, and he worked with Gorilla. They did Wrestling Challenge together, things like that, and he learned from Gorilla. So I guess Bobby was probably hoping that he would go along with it as somebody who also knew Gorilla. But I think, you know, the interesting thing is Tony Schiavone, and I don't, you know, it has said in interviews that it was Eric Bischoff who was in his ear and had kind of made that call.
Right.
But the thing about it is, you know, I looked into all these kinds of things, and that was during the period where Bischoff was fired. That was during the period where Russo was in and Bischoff had been fired, and Bischoff later came back, but Bischoff was not there when that happened. So, I mean, I think maybe he's misremembering that, but, you know, and I think Bobby, so I think more of the call for that came from Tony himself. And he, you know, he was stuck there. He was caught in the middle. You're talking about a man, Gorilla Monsoon. He'd never worked for WCW. He was kind of like the embodiment of their competition, the WWF. It would be like if they did a tribute to Vince McMahon, you know, maybe not quite as outrageous as that, but I think that's how he was looking at it. And so he pushed back on it, and Bobby threatened to walk off the show. Like, it got really heated that day leading up to TV. It was like they were at loggerheads, and they had to make a compromise. Bobby just was going to walk off. And so they said, okay, we'll let you say something, but make it quick, you know. And it just felt really cheap to him. And I think part of it is, if you watch it, Bobby sort of says at the beginning, like, you know, or I think it's Tony that says, you know, we'd both like to say something about somebody, a man that we worked with and that we loved. And he hands it over to Bobby, and then Bobby says what he's got to say. It's really brief but emotional, and then Tony just barrels ahead into the show. Like he has nothing to say. Like, he just takes over and just barrels ahead, and Bobby is sitting there. You watch it, it's hard to watch. He's emotionally crushed, and he's trying to talk about Bret Hart and the Steiner brothers and Chris Benoit, and he's doing his best. It's to his credit. He's powering through, but that was not the way to handle that at all, unfortunately.
It's wild as well, because I'm going to assume, rightly or wrongly, that they still probably had a Gorilla position in WCW, and they probably called it Gorilla.
Yeah, well, that name, it definitely started spreading through the business. You know, people always ask me, like, when did they name it that? And it's not like there was an official moment.
No,
you know, he manned that position all through the 70s and into the early 80s, and at some point, it had just started to be known as the Gorilla position. Now, before that, it was called you know, you'd be called the Q Man or things like that, or they had other names for it. And it started, so like, for example, you know, in the 80s and early 90s, probably it wasn't really being called that anywhere else. You know, and that started to trickle out when people who had worked for WWF before went to other places, and they started spreading it. So I don't know. It's an interesting question if by 1999, if they were calling it that even in WCW. Like, I know, for example, I mean, now they call it that everywhere. I've been at indie shows where they call it that, and I'm sure these young guys don't even have any idea why it's called that. In AEW, I have heard it sometimes referred to as the go position, which is a nice way to both abbreviate it and also avoid the name because it's so associated with WWE. I don't know, but I find it a little offensive, but that's what they apparently do there. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so.
I mean, yeah, because if you think about it, who would have been in that position in 1999, maybe in WCW?
Well, there were who would have been at their gorilla position. Oh
Yeah.
my God! I know their director was Craig Leathers. Maybe Russo. I don't,
because that's what I'm thinking. It would have been Russo. That's what I thought it might have
and
been.
he
Russo.
would have had no problem calling it that. Obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what makes me think that maybe he said, "Oh, that maybe it was referred to as gorilla then."
And it's also interesting. I didn't even mention this in the book that with someone like Russo there booking that he wouldn't have kind of helped Bobby out and pushed for that because you would have think that would mean something to him too, but I know nothing about that. I'm just speculating. Yeah.
Maybe we can ask him. We'll see if we can reach out and get some more on it.
I would love to know.
I mean, again, guys, read this book. It is phenomenal. It's out in America already, right?
It comes out September 30th. So,
right. I thought it was already out. So we've still got about a sort of 5 days a week, less than a week.
Well, with books, you know how it goes. They kind of trickle out. It's not like a movie. They just because of distribution and putting them on trucks, and there's no way to perfectly synchronize it. I mean, to be honest with you, publishing companies just kind of make up. They just pick a date. They really do. It's more like a window. Like I know, for example, one thing that's hard and fast is Amazon is not going to start shipping it until that date. But like, for example, people were showing me, we have Barnes & Noble here in the US. It's a big book chain. And people have been seeing it there. People have been telling me that they got it already. And I think what happens is when these bookstores get these big shipments in, they'll be instructed, hey, don't put it on your shelf till September 30th. But no one's going to really stop them. I mean, what are they going to do? So, or someone just doesn't know. And so it's already been getting out there. September 30th, and it's in the UK in November.
Yeah.
And as far as the audio book, because I know a lot of people ask about that. Actually, tomorrow I'm going in for the last recording date, which is just a pickup date, just to fix some mistakes and things.
Right.
And then I've been told that it's going to be turned around and available by next month, which seems crazy to me, but that's what they tell me. So we'll see.
Incredible. And that's you reading it as well, right?
It's me. I insisted on letting me do it, not have somebody mangle all the names and everything. So it is me.
A quick question, a stupid question, maybe a frivolous one, but interesting one. If you couldn't have done it and you could pick anyone in the world to have done it, who would you pick?
Well, it's so funny because when they were arguing with me about it, they asked me the same question.
Oh shit! What did you say?
Well, here's the thing. I had two dream choices. My ultimate dream choice is not alive anymore because one of the things when I wrote this book, I kind of wrote it in the style of almost like a mob book, like something like Wise Guy by Nick Pileggi, the book that inspired Goodfellas, or his other book Casino. I was kind of thinking in that style. So in a perfect world, the greatest narrator for this audiobook would have been Ray Liotta, because he does the narration for Goodfellas. That would have been beautiful. However, since we don't have Ray Liotta, I'm a big fan of the Ken Burns documentaries. I absolutely love them, and they have such great narrators on them. And one guy who is so good is Keith David. He's an actor who he actually did work for WWE once. There was if you guys remember the DVD release, the history of the World Heavyweight title. It's like this beautiful clamshell box. I have it over here. It's like a brown clamshell box. There's a documentary on there which covers the history of the World Heavyweight title in wrestling from like Frank Gotch up to the WWE. Right. And Keith David is the narrator, and it sounds beautiful. And if I had my perfect way and all the money in the world, it would be Keith David.
Wicked. Great. So it wasn't a silly question then.
No, I like that question. Yeah.
Did you manage to get Brett to narrate the forward?
Oh, God. Yeah. We didn't even talk about that. So Bret Hart who is more famous than me and arguably even Gorilla Monsoon, wrote the foreword to the book.
Yeah.
And no, he does not narrate the foreword. I that would have been very difficult to pull off, but I did it, and just like I did for Rob Van Dam, who did the foreword to the Sheik book. But it was so cool getting Brett on board. I mean, his brother Ross helped out with that. I was introduced to Ross by a guy named Tom Burke, who I don't know if you know him. He's a big collector, historian. He used to work in wrestling magazines. You know, he's a wonderful guy, and he lives not too far from me. He introduced me to Ross. Ross connected me with Brett because I didn't really understand the connection that Gorilla had with the Hart family until I started talking to them. And Brett was totally on board. Like, he was so good about it. He got it to me. He wrote it all himself. He was very passionate about it. And I'm so excited to have him, you know, on the cover of that book and part of that book. Is just amazing.
Incredible, man. Incredible. So where are we at? So we're sort of so the wrestling days are over. He's behind the scenes. He was integral to, you know, would they have called it a producer back then?
No, they wouldn't have, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
They would have, you know, he would have been called an agent, or he was a booker. He was part of the booking, and that's another thing a lot of people don't realize. People don't really talk about the booking of the WWF, especially from the territory days. Like, you always hear, oh, this guy was booking this territory, that guy was booking that territory. And with the WWF, it's not well discussed because basically it was Vince Sr., especially the main event programs and things. And in those days, they didn't really have a ton of angles, especially outside the main event. It would just be you're bringing in, you know, what heels and faces you're bringing in. I mean, there wasn't
squashes.
It wasn't, squashes. It wasn't like today where, you know, everybody has an angle and a storyline. But Gorilla would help Vince with the booking. Vince Sr. and Bruno was involved in his own programs with booking and things like that. So they would have called him a lot of things, but not producer. That was not the word at the time. I mean, even when I was there in the 2000s was right around the time they started changing over the term from agent to producer. Right. And I still just called them agents, but, you know, but he was a TV producer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was integral to a lot of stuff going back then. And, you know, so when did he actually stop wrestling then? So when he retired in the ring, what?
Well,
mid-70s, was
in the WWF, he retired in 1980, actually.
Oh, damn.
And he had a big retirement match with Ken Patera at the Spectrum.
Okay.
And what happened after that was, you know, he came back a couple of times, but not like a comeback. He never had a run. He would come back here and there when somebody no-showed or they needed somebody to fill in. Like, he did that about 3 or 4 times, up through even as late as 1983 or 82. And actually, the other place where he still wrestled, although no one here knew about it, was down in Puerto Rico. Not, you know, part-time, like between 80 and 83, he probably had like about 10 or 12 matches down in Puerto Rico. And then so the last truly last match was like the fall of 1983, which is crazy because that's just a few months before Hulk Hogan wins the WWF title. But he had his last match in Puerto Rico around that time.
I mean, was that's where he had the boxing match with Andre as well, wasn't it, Puerto Rico?
Yeah, that was in 78. It always gets called, labeled 77. I don't know where that date came about, but it's everywhere. But I looked it all up, and it was actually 78. They had a big boxing match down there, and Gorilla was the heel. Gorilla worked heel most of the time in Puerto Rico, and it's really entertaining to watch. Like, I know, you know, it's not Ali and Frazier, you know what I mean? But they put on a show, and I mean, they do a great job with it. And that was the thing. Gorilla owned a piece of that territory too. He owned 10% of it. So he was really invested, you know, and that's why he went down there and did all those favors for them, because he was trying to build up the business down there. In fact, at one point when the sale to Vince Jr. was happening and he wasn't quite sure how things were going to go, at first, Puerto Rico was like his backup plan. Like, if things didn't work out in New York, he would take his money and go down there and just focus on that.
Yeah, we got to watch that match with Lord Alfred Hayes as the commentary. I don't know if it was the same with you guys.
Yeah, that's I think how most people have seen it, because
Yeah.
however it happened, the WWF wound up getting the footage. I mean, I'm sure probably Gorilla facilitated that. They got the footage in the mid 80s and they popped it on one of their Coliseum videos because it's a great attraction, to have that on the back of the tape. Gorilla Monsoon versus Andre the Giant in a boxing match, And of course, they had Lord Alfred slap on his, commentary to that. It was not the original commentary because that would have been whatever Puerto Rican commentators they had doing that show. But so that's the version that most people have seen. Yeah.
And sorry, obviously, Gorilla was not averse to working with other boxers around around the time. The infamous airplane spin of Muhammad Ali is. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible that he gets to, be a part of. Like, he got to do that, and I'm guessing Ali was completely sold on it as well.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that really is, as far as mainstream culture is concerned, that is the most famous moment of his entire life, I would have to say, even more than to the average person that knows nothing about wrestling, even more than being a WWF commentator, where he's in the ring for 2 minutes with the most famous athlete in human history. It was quite a moment, and it was the lead up to the Ali and Inoki match that was happening, and the WWF was involved in that. And so that was a match that was designed to make Ali look vulnerable. And that's why Gorilla does that airplane spin and slams him and even trashes him in the promo after the match. It was supposed to, because Ali was unstoppable. So to a lot of people watching, they thought with Inoki, first of all, they didn't really know who he was in America. And they were thinking like, well, Ali's just going to knock him out in a minute. Like, well, this is a joke. And so that match was designed with Monsoon to make people pause and go, oh, wait a minute, maybe he might actually lose this if he doesn't know what he's doing. And that was the purpose of it.
Crazy. That infamous match with Ali and Inoki.
Yes.
The kicking of the legs and the
5 stars, man. 5 stars.
5 stars, man. It's
the funny thing about that match is I think like in recent times, for whatever reason, it's like people have been more complimentary towards it. I guess because they have this sort of like half-assed theory that it led to MMA somehow. But I mean,
it's a half-assed theory. Absolutely.
It's half-assed. But the thing is, it was a disaster. It was considered a complete failure, like financially, artistically, in every way, that a failure and a black eye to both businesses, boxing and wrestling. Yeah. And Ali was really messed up. His legs were like permanently injured. I think there was permanent damage that was done to his legs in that match.
It's crazy.
Just a disaster.
Yeah, it was absolutely. So through his again, guys, we cannot reiterate enough. Buy this book; it is phenomenal.
I feel like I'm on the Home Shopping Network.
It is, man. This is like with a difference, man. This is like, buy this book. It is absolutely phenomenal. And Brian,
we'll shill it like Don West, man, if we have to. Yeah.
Honestly, this is
Mark McGuire rookie card.
Honestly, you've not scrimped on content on this. Like you say, it's a huge book. So we'll work our way gradually through it because we could sit here and talk with Brian all night, but we'll gradually work our way through. So he's finished wrestling, he's behind the scenes, doing bits and bobs, sort of from mid-80s all the way through to sort of, we remember him fondly again with the commentary with Jesse the Body Ventura. I mean, what was their relationship like?
Yeah, I kind of talked about the differences between the two. So, the thing with Jesse, I have every reason to believe that it was a very professional and respectful relationship. They just were not the like very close friends that Gorilla and Bobby became. It doesn't mean that they didn't get along, but it was much more professional. They were very different kinds of people, whereas Bobby and Gino were very similar kinds of people. And Jesse was, also Jesse was a rabble rouser. Jesse was trying to start a union and standing up for himself. And you can't forget that Gorilla was part of the office, you know, and that was never forgotten, even though Gorilla always made sure that he was also one of the boys. And I want to be clear on this. He was never an office stooge, and he was very much against people being office stooges. He was not a backstabber. He was not one of these conniving locker room lawyers. Not at all. He was not like that. But he still was Vince's lieutenant, and Jesse knew that. So I'm sure that that was, you know, always a present part of their relationship. But, you know, I think it was still a very respectful relationship. In fact, the funny thing was, for years and years, Jesse never really talked about it at all, never said anything about him. And I know even when he was elected governor in Minnesota, we got to do an interview with him for Raw Magazine. And I had them ask him, like, because Gorilla Monsoon had only passed away a couple of years before, to talk about Gorilla. And he had almost nothing to say at that time. It was very just kind of surface comments, just, you know, and quickly moved on to other things. But I think in more recent years, he's gotten a little more nostalgic, because there's been a couple of appearances lately. There was one on the Bill Simmons podcast. There was one, I think might have been ESPN or something, where he talked in very glowing terms about Gorilla and working with him. And in fact, I even grabbed a couple of those quotes. The book was almost done. I grabbed a couple of those quotes and I threw them in the book, because I really wanted to represent the relationship as well as I could.
There was, I think there was a couple of sort of under the radar sort of ribs between them, though, when Joey was refereeing, right? That was like a sort of under the radar inside sort of joke where, you know, he would say, "Oh, this referee's terrible," and, you know, and that was sort of because no one really knew that Joey was Gorilla's son. Like, you know, obviously people in the company knew or whatever, but sort of in the wider audience, it wasn't sort of well known, right?
No, it wasn't known. It was never acknowledged publicly by the company until Joey died, and they mentioned it then. And especially in the magazine, there was something about it. No, they never did, and that was an inside joke. And I think Jesse might not have only been the only one to do it. I think other commentators would do it, talk about, you know, how he was a terrible official and things like this. Somebody was telling me, I never heard it, but Gorilla for years, he did commentary at the Spectrum, and the guy he worked with was a guy named what was his name? Dick Graham. And Dick Graham was not a WWF employee. He worked for the network. He worked for the Prism Network, which was the cable network that carried the shows. So he was not really hip to the whole thing. He was not clued in on things. And I think he once mentioned it on the air. And I don't think Gorilla was too happy about it, and sort of kind of changed the subject and moved on. But he said something about it because he didn't know that, you know, he wasn't supposed to. But yeah, for whatever reason, that was just kept under wraps. It was, no one really knew about it publicly at the time.
Yeah. And obviously, you mentioned it there. Sadly, Joey died in a car accident in '94. Was it?
Yeah, July 4th.
Yeah, he was in the car with who was he in the car with?
Harvey Whippleman.
That's it. Harvey Whippleman was in the car, and you know, Gino made a point of saying to Harvey, you know, like, you know, I don't blame you, sort of for it, sort of, you know, it's obviously a sad thing, but was it right that sort of rules were changed after them, that, you know, they sort of insisted that instead of driving tired, these guys would get a hotel and maybe not travel alone, or what went down?
The problem arose because this is '94. Their business was in the toilet, and they were really cutting corners. They were really trying to save money. Like, I remember when I worked there, they used to tell me how when things got really bad in the mid '90s, they were like cutting corners even on office supplies, like pencils, paper.
Wow.
It got that bad. They lost $6 million in 1995, and I think it was the only losing year that the company has ever had. So they were just like scrimping any way they could, but they had this really ill-advised rule that they started, which was you had to fly out from the same airport that you flew in from. because it saves money to do it that way. It costs less for the tickets and the air travel. So, but what that could mean is sometimes these crazy drives, because if you land, like in this case, they landed in Newark, New Jersey,
Right.
and they're doing a string of house shows and TVs all along the East Coast. And each one they're doing, in some cases, they're driving further and further and further away.
Yeah.
And then finally, when the run ends, you got to go all the way back to where you started. So they had, I don't know how well you guys know the geography, but they had wound up in Ocean City, Maryland, down by Baltimore, which is like New Jersey's in the Northeast, and Newark, New Jersey is near New York City. And the Baltimore area is like halfway down the East Coast.
Wow.
It's not that far from like Washington, D.C. So these guys had to drive overnight. The show ends whenever they load out, 11 o'clock, midnight, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
Now they got to drive, and their flight's in the morning. So they have to drive through the night to get there. And they just had finished a 17 show tour or something, 17 days straight on the road, basically. So they were all dead. And the sad thing about it was, now he had to fly out of New Jersey, and that's where his parents lived, Gino and Maureen. They lived right not too far from where the accident happened, off the New Jersey Turnpike. And a couple of other guys I talked to, Mike Chioda and Tony Chimmel, who Gorilla had brought into the company, they were both New Jersey guys. And they even said to Joey, why don't you could just crash at your parents' house, or we have a beach house on the Jersey Shore. Come, because it was the 4th of July. Come hang out with us. And Joey was absolutely intent. Like, he wanted to get home. He just bought a new house in Florida. He had a girlfriend down there. They were having a 4th of July celebration there. Right. He's like, guys, I've been away from home for almost 3 weeks. Like, I have bills to pay. I got all this stuff I got to do.
Right.
And he insisted. And the thing that happened, the real problem was they both fell asleep. That's the thing. Yeah. Because the whole purpose of traveling with somebody else, right, in that situation is they make sure you don't fall asleep. They both fell asleep. And Joey was the one driving, and they veered off the highway into an embankment, and they hit a tree, and, it was on the driver's side. So Harvey, Bruno Lauer, he walked away with just a scratch, literally a scratch on his hand, and Joey was instantly killed.
Did you ever manage to speak to old downtown Bruno about it?
Well, funny you should say. So I'll say this. What the hell? So apparently, I guess Bruno has not had the most glowing complimentary things to say about Joey. I don't know, over the years since it happened. And I was kind of told of this, that, it may not be the best idea to talk to him about the situation. So instead, and actually another problem that I had was, well, I'll say this too. He was one of the people that wanted to be paid to talk. And that's something we generally don't do, especially with these kind of books. Profit margin's very slim as it is, and you can't pay everybody. And plus, on top of that, it's bad journalistic ethics to pay people for an interview, especially of this kind. Not to mention the fact that it was, I thought, a little bit distasteful to be asking for money to talk about this situation in particular, about someone that died, and that was supposedly your friend. I don't know. So that didn't work out. But thankfully, Harvey Whippleman has a book, and he talks about it in there. And so I did the same thing I did with Sabu for the Sheik book, which is I just read the book, and I got what I needed out of that.
It's wild, isn't it, man? Like you say, it's slightly weird, like you say, a bit distasteful, really, especially like you say, an incident like that, and especially when, as well, even in his own words, he said that Gino was, really understanding about it and didn't sort of like fucking blame him or anything like that,
Right.
So
Right.
Crazy. I mean, that would have. Do you think that sort of? Some people have said that Gino sort of. He passed away 5 years later, and he said that a lot of people have said that really broke his heart. I mean, obviously, it would do. Your son dying at 31 in an accident like that. I mean, it really affected him, right?
Yeah. That was a turning point. He never came back from that. He was never the same person again. His health had already been declining. It declined even more precipitously, and his passion for the business really started to evaporate. That's when he starts to really come off commentary. And to be honest, the president thing they gave him, what it was a way to keep him on TV, but not have him do that much work. So he wasn't doing the gorilla position anymore. He wasn't making all the shows and doing all this commentary and coordinating things. Literally, all he needed to do was, I mean, if you guys remember this from back then, he'd appear on TV maybe once every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
He'd come to the ring or something. He'd talk for like 5 minutes. And that literally was all he was doing. I mean, the TV, the president, the role of the president by that point was just a TV character, even more than it had been with, say, like Jack Tunney, who Jack Tunney actually had an office in Toronto. He ran WWF Canada. Like he actually had responsibilities, but Gino was just a TV character by that point. He'd come out there, he'd issue some kind of decree.
Yeah.
And then he'd
Make
go
a
backstage, right?
Yeah.
And then he'd go backstage and probably start playing cards again with Arnold Skoland or Pat Patterson or whoever.
Right.
That was where he was at that point in his head.
Yeah.
Well, he still got to chop Vader, didn't he? So
yes, he did. I got to talk to Jim Cornette about that, because who was in the ring when that happened, and that was probably the highlight of his years as the president of the WWF. That was and the last time that anybody put their hands on him, and the first time in many years.
Crazy. I mean, both of them in their day. I mean, can you imagine Vader in his prime versus Gorilla Monsoon in his prime?
Well,
My
that's
God.
that's what got me about that situation, because I think one of the reasons that Gorilla agreed to do it was, in some ways, Gorilla Monsoon in his prime was like the Vader of the 1960s. He was very similar to what Vader was in the 90s. They were about the same size, Gorilla at his peak, around the same size overall, and they had the same level, like what Vader was known for. Like, I would call Vader, in my own experience as a wrestling fan, probably the best big man I've ever seen, like in his prime, in terms of moving and athleticism and so-called work rate for a big guy. He was incredible. But Gorilla was that type for his era, and I think Gorilla recognized that and wanted to really help this guy and give him whatever he could to get over. And there was also the issue of that Vader needed time off for surgery, so he got signed by the company and then immediately needed shoulder surgery, so they had to figure out this creative way to get him off TV.
Yeah.
And it also got Gorilla off TV for a little while, which maybe he didn't mind so much. But unfortunately, all the effort they put into it, the Vader in the WWF just was kind of a bust, sadly, for a variety of reasons, but not because of anything having to do with Gorilla, that's for sure.
I would chuck in Bam Bam Bigelow as well, just for
yes,
he was another one.
He's another one. Yeah, in fact, I would call them both, and I think I might have mentioned Bam Bam in the book, although maybe not. Like, Bam Bam and Vader were like the modern day Gorilla Monsoons.
Yeah, and
in fact,
Bam Bam was from Jersey as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, and Bam Bam used to do the cartwheels,
yeah,
which Gorilla also did early in his career and used to even do as an amateur. So I did not touch on this in the book, but I'm very curious if Bam Bam Bigelow used to do the cartwheels even before the WWF, or if he got that idea from Gorilla. That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder. I'm thinking out loud, because I actually didn't reference that in the book at all.
So, getting to him winding down in the WWF, when did he actually, just stop doing anything? Was there a specific sort of date where he just said, right, no, that's it, I'm done?
Well, he was starting to be phased out, even going back to 93, when you had the combination of Jim Ross coming in, even though Jim Ross would come and go for a few years. Jim Ross coming in, and also Monday Night Raw, which was starting to become their flagship show, and he had nothing to do with it. I mean, on camera.
Yeah.
He would still be in Gorilla for that show, but that was Vince and Bobby Heenan, Randy Savage, so, and then Jerry Lawler. So it was already starting. So at that point, like going into 94, 95, he was kind of used when necessary. Like he would come back to Wrestling Challenge for a while when he was needed. And he actually stayed with Challenge until it ended in 95, and then he became the president. So it was kind of gradually over time. But as far as with him as the president, in the summer of 97, he had a very serious heart attack. And he had several, but this one almost killed him. And at that point, they took him off TV. And that's where he stopped being a TV character. And that's why people didn't see him again until WrestleMania 15, like a year and a half later.
Yeah.
Yeah, WrestleMania 15, where he was the judge, wasn't he? And poor Bart Gunn got his head spun.
Yeah, that's how the book opens.
It starts,
It starts with that scene, and then it goes back to the beginning from there. Yeah.
The old brawl for all, right?
Oh, God.
Brawl for all. And I even talk about how he was not a big fan of that whole thing. You know, he was not. That even goes back to the Ali thing. He wasn't a fan of that either. He didn't like the idea of getting involved in situations that you couldn't completely control. Even I talk a little bit about the 76 show at Shea Stadium where they had Andre the Giant against the boxer Chuck Wepner. And Ali was Andre's corner man. And part of the reason that he was involved and was the corner man was they had to make sure that everybody did business and that nobody tried to pull any funny business. So he didn't like situations like that because it did break down a little bit, that Wepner and Andre fight. So, you know, I don't think he was a fan of the Brawl for All. And honestly, like I talk about in the book, he apparently was not a fan of the Attitude Era at all.
And I mean, do you want to delve into that a little bit as well? Why he wasn't a fan? Because he thought it was sort of veering off too much from the principles of wrestling.
Yeah, you know, and that happens a lot with the older generations and things. I think some of his dissatisfaction was already starting in the mid 90s because he was seeing the combination of the companies going downhill and a lot of these new guys that are coming up. Because you have to remember, in the earlier days, they had all the greatest stars of the territories come in. The greatest pros ever. Like it was like an all-star team. Yeah. And then when you get to the new generation era now, you're getting a new generation literally coming up and he's trying to create new stars. And I think he sort of felt like a lot of it was subpar. Like he wasn't happy with a lot of their work in the ring. He was getting very frustrated with the matches that he had to call. And then when you get to the Attitude Era, he was not a fan of all the, like, people were telling me a lot of eye rolling, a lot of like grinning and bearing it. Like he was not a fan of the McMahons getting involved in the ring and Vince wrestling. He wasn't a fan of the more edgy content. You know, he was one of those guys from a generation where, like, yeah, you know, you can curse like a sailor in the locker room, but you don't do that in the ring. You don't do it on TV. You don't do it when there's families there and kids and, you know, and women and things. And so he was uncomfortable with that. Like I write about in the book, how he worked with Steve Austin when he was the president, you know, that very memorable. It's sort of like some of the last things he ever did. And he was great in that role, but he respected Austin a lot as a worker and he loved guys that could put on a great match. That's why he loved Bret Hart. But he was not a fan of the language, especially. Like these things really got to him. And I know it seems quaint today. We live in a world where like you can almost say anything you want, even on network television at this point in America, at least. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Like even the things that are said on Raw and SmackDown. I'm watching it with my little kid going like, wow, why, how are they allowed to say, you know, but this is a different time. And that stuff was not the norm. And he was not thrilled about it. He was not. But again, even he couldn't deny that it also helped turn their business around. So I just think also he wasn't that invested anymore emotionally. Like he was just throwing his hands up at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like that he wouldn't swear backstage because there's a lot of stories of him. He would swear like a trooper. Like, you know, it would be, you know, it's not like he was adverse to swearing. It was just like you say, on TV, it's a different, you know, it's a whole different thing.
Right. He wasn't like a shrinking violet, you know, like don't offend my ears. But a lot of the old school entertainers in general were like that. Like you read about, you know, people talk about these roasts, like the roasts they do today are so filthy. And you watch, you know, back then they used to have what was called the Friars Club roast, where they would tear each other apart just as filthy, but the difference was they had it behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And then when they were on TV, they were all squeaky clean. All those old comedians we had here, like Milton Berle and Jack Benny and Bob Hope, and they were squeaky clean, but not when the camera stopped rolling.
Yeah.
That was what it was like back then.
Man, I love a good roast. Could I, while we're on that, it's a great segue. Obviously, WWE did a roast recently.
Yes, they did.
And first of all, did you go? Were you there? Have you seen anything of it?
No, I've seen bits and pieces, usually the stuff that's supposed to get people in trouble, but I was not there. I know about the Paul Heyman stuff and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you reckon of that as well? Because I think it's sort of like you say, it's a completely. I mean, I watch Kill Tony, and I've watched Tony Hinchcliffe doing various stuff. I do occasionally watch Kill Tony, and for me, it's weird to like have someone like Tony Hinchcliffe like doing because roasts are pretty sort of wild, man. I mean, like and it's supposed to be a PG product. I know it wasn't televised or anything like that, but it's just. Seems weird to me, man.
I think I have a few thoughts on this. I think it's partly WWE leaning more into more mature content and more like if you notice they started doing ads for alcohol in recent years, things that they never used to do.
The vodka stuff.
Right, the vodka, and there's other, not just the vodka. The Rock has his tequila, and there's some kind of whiskey they were doing, Buffalo Trace or something, and the language and some of the content has sort of felt like it's been leaning back into Attitude Era territory at times. And so I think this was part of that, where they're leaning into, we could let our hair down a little bit more in ways that I think even Vince would be uncomfortable with. Vince, who in his private life has no problem with whatever, as we know in far too graphic detail now, but still was always thinking about what customers would think. I also think, and I'll get a little political with this here, but Tony Hinchcliffe has that Trump association, and he performed at the Madison Square Garden rally that they did, and he ruffled some feathers there, and that got him a lot of headlines. And I think it's sort of part of that whole, WWE kind of is now in bed with UFC, which is very Trump friendly. And I think it's a little bit of kind of like, they used to be a lot more coy about these things. Like we know, Vince McMahon was always a Republican in his political leanings in private life.
Sure.
But I think the company has been more bold lately about, they showed, Triple H going to the White House and all that stuff. They've been more bold about openly standing by the Trump movement. And I think this was a manifestation of that too. That's just how I interpreted it.
Yeah. I mean, Tony Hinchcliffe's a huge wrestling fan. I mean, he was on the Joe Rogan Experience when they had like Jake the Snake on, and they've had like other sort of wrestling when they had Ric Flair on, for example. So I know he's like, he is a huge wrestling fan. I mean, he's done various bits and bobs. But talking about Vince McMahon very quickly, because we had you on a little while ago when the whole sort of Vince thing sort of came to prominence in the media and stuff like that. And I watched WrestlePalooza, and I was very surprised that I don't know if they still do it. I'm assuming they do, that they would take signs from people. And there was a guy, I don't know if you've seen it, JB, on WrestlePalooza. The first match on the card was Brock Lesnar versus John Cena, right? And in the background, there was a guy, and it was prominent on hard cam for a long time. And it said something like, he shouldn't be here, and we all know why, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was something like that. And it was prominent for a good sort of, I'd say like 5, 6, 7 minutes. Like this guy in the Brock match was sort of, behind the, do they still take people's signs, or did someone just not clock that, or do they just not care? I mean, what is your stuff like that.
I've also been seeing signs making light of the insane ticket prices. There's been some signs like that.
Yeah.
One guy had a sign that said, "I sold my house for this seat," or,
yeah.
like, "I'm broke now," or something. I don't know. I mean, I'd be surprised that if they weren't taking signs. Maybe they
Sure.
just missed that one, or
Maybe,
it took them a long time to get all the way up there and get it because he was way up there. I don't know. I can guarantee you that they're still taking signs. Even AEW takes signs. That's just a wrestling thing now.
Yeah. That's why I was like, man, they are. That's the first thought when I saw it. I was like, they're going to take that soon. They're going to take
it. They probably did, but maybe it just took them a while to get up there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like any time now, someone's going to grab
or maybe nobody picked up on it, what that meant. It's possible that it just went over their heads. That's possible.
Maybe there's so much other stuff going on, like say, maybe someone just, missed it. So, So I mean, we get to a bit of a tangent, but so we get to 1999. He's not in great health, and Gorilla passes away. Did you say it was October, wasn't it? October 99.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, he came back. He actually, people didn't realize this, but even by early 98, he was already back, but he just wasn't on TV. He was backstage at local events. He would go into the TV studio and do voiceovers. So he was still involved right up to the very end, but his health just kept getting worse and worse. They had him doing international, in fact, some of the stuff that made it to the UK instead of here, they were doing like UK versions of Superstars and Shotgun Saturday Night and all Sunday Night Heat or whatever they were doing, UK and Canadian versions. And he'd be on there with like Michael Cole and Dr. Tom Pritchard or teams like that. I think he was on there with Raymond Rougeau. Just really off the radar, especially as far as American fans were concerned. And then finally, he was up in there right until the end. He had his first recording session in late September of 1999. And then a few days later, he had another heart attack. And that one he never recovered from. He went into the hospital and they knew that he wasn't going to make it. He was on machines to keep him alive. And he made the decision that he didn't want to be on the machines anymore. So they sent him home, and he passed away at home just a few days later in early October 99. In fact, we're coming up on the 26th anniversary. I think it was October 6th.
Right.
Wow.
I mean, he wasn't very old, really, as well, right?
62.
Yeah,
62, which in the United States isn't even old enough to get on Social Security yet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was not an elderly man. He was not. He looked it by the end. He looked at, like I wrote in the book, he looked at least 10 years older than he was at the end there when he came out at WrestleMania 15. But 62, I mean, I posted something online that actually went viral like about a year ago where I wrote that, Billy Gunn right now is the age that Gorilla Monsoon was at that time.
Yeah.
And so he, when you're that big, you never expect an extremely long life. There's often complications. You're very lucky to live to a ripe old age when you're that big. However, if he had taken care of himself, he could have lived, I think, another 10, 15 years at least. But he lived the way he wanted to live, and he made his decisions, and that's what he wanted to do, and that's that.
What was that the wrestling lifestyle, the traveling, just didn't eat well?
It was, he had diabetes, and I think he stopped really looking after it and following doctor's orders. He was a heavy smoker, as all those guys were. I mean, Heenan was, Mean Gene was, JR is. That's just, half the wrestlers probably were in that era, if not more. And he wasn't going to stop. And, we know now that contributes to heart disease on top of the diabetes causing heart disease and kidney failure. And it was more that kind of stuff and just losing his will to live because of of losing his son and just being disillusioned about everything towards the end. He was not happy at the end.
No. Sad.
Yes.
I want to bring it onto a more lighter note, and we'll talk about the more of the sort of, I guess, is it called golden era? I guess like that sort of. That
I don't know.
89
People
to
call it
92,
that
yeah,
now.
it's like
That's a thing now that people say. I
apparently so,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
That sort of that era. I mean, like, I have a favorite show where Heenan and Monsoon work together. It's WrestleMania 8. My wife hates me putting it on because I can recite it almost word for word. I know what they're going to say. It's hilarious. It's brilliant. Like, do you have a favorite show that they did or anything like that?
You're talking about Monsoon and Heenan specifically?
Yeah.
For me, it's Royal Rumble '92. I mean, they add so much to that show and that match that I think that's their finest hour as calling matches. However, I also love their stuff on primetime, the bits they did and the comedy stuff. My favorite thing they ever did was the day that they were at Trump Plaza in '88, leading up to WrestleMania 4, and you had Gorilla at the blackjack tables, and you had Bobby's at the massage table, and Gorilla comes in and he sends the girl away, and he starts just beating Bobby up on the table. I mean, that is just genuinely laugh out loud funny stuff.
Mate, the Royal Albert Hall show that we had over here, they were fantastic. Where they kept talking about the cup. There was this sort of
the
Samovar trophy,
yeah, and it was just even from the word go, like straight away on that show, it was like, no, Lord Robert of Hedon or something like that. The banter between them was just fantastic. So I mean, they were integral to. As we've grown up watching the wrestling business, those two guys together were just, perfection, really, in the commentary booth.
Yeah, and they often get called the greatest commentary team of all time. I know a lot of people consider them that. And it's funny because at the time, I don't think they got enough credit because the comedy stuff that they would do, some people, especially older fans, would use that to kind of discredit them. But to the younger fans and the people who loved them, those were the exact reasons that they loved them. And I think there's been kind of a changing of perspective in recent years on things like that. Like for a lot of things, like for example, another example I think of is Dusty Rhodes. I remember when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, he kind of had a bad rap. A lot of people thought there was a lot of negative around him, like that, he was resting on his laurels or his promos, his work in the ring, he was out of shape, blah, 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 him as a booker. And yet now, in all these years later, he's like, almost like a god of wrestling, the way that he's revered by old school, by fans, young fans today who never even saw him. And even the older fans from back then, now it's like they sort of have a more nostalgic view. And I think sometimes that happens with things in wrestling where things get reappraised and you remember how much you loved it. And then the people that were kids then grow up and become the adults. And so a lot of the opinions on things change. I've seen it. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I can just tell you that the prequels were generally considered absolute disasters. The ones that came out in 99, 02, and 05, they're like embarrassingly bad. But I talked to people that were little kids back then, and the general consensus is that they were great. And I can't comprehend that, but that's what happens when the younger fans become the people who make the decisions,
Yeah. Crazy, man. Crazy. I mean, Brian, we've had you for an hour to ourselves, and we are extremely grateful for that because we know you're an extremely busy guy. Everyone wants a piece of Brian R. Solomon right now to do with this book because it is phenomenal. And
Chris, sorry, I got to ask this before. Like, I'm sorry, like, I sound like shit here, but
go for it,
Brian. What's next?
Yes, what is next?
Well, I'm taking a little breather because I did 3 books in a row, one on top of the other. I did Blood and Fire, then I did my superheroes book, and then Gorilla Monsoon without a break. Like they were overlapping. I was working on, not even waiting for one to be done. So now I'm just catching my breath, honestly. Like I may do something non-wrestling related next. I kind of like to alternate. Like I might just do like a novel or a memoir or something, totally out of the box like that. If I do something wrestling related, I have a few ideas in mind for biographies. I thought about doing one on Antonino Rocca, who was kind of like wrestling's first real high flyer, which I think is really relevant today because the style he worked back then, which was considered like such a freak show, is now the normal style that almost everybody works, So I thought about him, and I also had an idea to do a coffee table book about wrestling magazines, like a big art book, like the ones that they do about comic books and things, except do it about wrestling magazines. But again, these are just pie in the sky kind of things. I'm just, taking a little break for a little bit until this book sort of like dies down, and then I'll think of what I'm going to do.
So, Antonio Rocca, what was the era there?
That would have been like late 40s through early 60s as a wrestler.
Crazy, man. Wow, that is going back.
He was actually the first major main event star for Capital Wrestling, which was the company that became the WWF. He was their top guy before Bruno. That's what he was. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're always in anticipation of what you're going to be doing next. You truly do deserve a bit of a break. So you're still going to be smashing out the podcast. You're still going to be.
Oh yeah, not a break from that. Just a break from writing books.
Yeah.
I'm still doing the podcast. I have no plans to stop doing that. I enjoy it very much. And but just the writing books is a whole other level of work. Like it's not even writing magazine articles doesn't compare to that. Like when I'm working on the books, I have to come down here. This is down in my office lair down here and just hold myself up, close the doors. I'm down here for hours, just not think about anything else. And I really devote myself to it. And that's what I kind of want to take a little break from, that kind of thing.
Well, it's not a basement, is it?
It is a basement. Yeah.
Oh no.
It's a combination. So that's the other, there's no windows here. So it's like a combination. I don't know if you could see, it's like my office plus like a rec room here, which is like where my son basically plays video games, and then a library. I've got all my books back there. It's just an all-purpose study, I guess you could call it. It's my study.
So you are the archetypal basement dwelling wrestling fan.
Well, I even have wood paneling, so I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
We love what you do, Brian, and we anticipate everything you're doing because you are our favorite wrestling journalist. You can still get your piece of Brian R. Solomon on the wrestling podcast. You're going to be taking, so hopefully you can go and get to see more baseball games because I see you went to see the Bananas, right?
I did, yeah. And by the way, the podcast is called Shut Up and Wrestle.
It is Shut Up and Wrestle,
and I encourage people to check it out because it's all old school content. We don't talk about current wrestling. There's enough people that do that. I don't need to throw my hat in that ring, but it's really fun. Like you guys said, I just had Sean Mooney on. I'm going to be having Gorilla's daughter Valerie on for next week, the week that the book comes out. But yeah, baseball. I took my son to see the Savannah Bananas at Yankee Stadium, and it was the first time he'd ever been to Yankee Stadium, which to me is almost like slightly sacrilegious that the first time he would ever go to what is essentially here like the cathedral of baseball would be to see like the Savannah Bananas. So, but we had an awesome time though. I'm not gonna deny it. We had a ball that night. Yeah,
that's fantastic. It looks good because sometimes I'll watch well, I'm giving away a little bit here, but sometimes I watch soccer on American channels, and I will occasionally see bits of highlights of the Bananas and that sort of league.
Yeah, they show them here on the streaming service HBO Max. I think that's the one, or maybe it's Peacock. One of the streaming services actually carries their games.
Crazy, man. That's fantastic. But let's hope you deserve a break, mate. And your podcast, you've had some of the guests. I will say to people as well, you need to check out Brian's podcast because the guests you've had on there over the years, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal guests that you get on there.
Thank you. Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do it because I'm kind of lazy about that stuff and I don't like to chase people down. So I started thinking, I know enough interesting people in and around the wrestling business who I don't have to introduce myself to, who I could just reach out to and say, hey, you want to do this? And that's kind of how I've carried the show. Almost everybody I have on there are people that I already knew and had a relationship with. Sean Mooney's an exception to that, but almost everyone are people where I could just like text them and just say, hey, you want to do the show? Or if I see that they're on Facebook one day, I'll just reach out with a message. So that's kind of made the show very easy for me. When I run out of guests, maybe I'll think about shutting down, but that's not happening anytime soon.
Don't do that. Do not shut down.
No,
Shut
please.
Up and Wrestle. Phenomenal podcast. Phenomenal book. So guys, let's just reiterate. This is Gorilla Monsoon, the life and times, Irresistible Force. So I'm taking it that was named after one of his catchphrases, right? The Irresistible Force meets the immovable object, right?
Right. Because, funny, a lot of people have said to me, well, why didn't you call the book Will You Stop? And the thing about it is, my philosophy to this is if you're going to pick a catchphrase or something that the person's associated with saying, it's got to also still be somehow related to the book and what the book's about.
Yeah.
And to call it Will You Stop, I just feel like some people would just kind of be scratching their heads. Why the hell is it called that? Unless you're a super, super fan. But calling it Irresistible Force, like obviously, like you said, it's one of his lines. Yeah. But to me, and I think I make the case in the book, it could also be used as a way to describe him.
Absolutely. And that's why I thought it was a perfect title, because as you say, you talk about that, and the Irresistible Force meets the immovable object, a fantastic personality in the wrestling business. And like we say, we have literally just not even skimmed the surface of that book. So guys, if you're watching, please go out and get that book. It's probably available in America. Where's the best place for people to get it in the UK? I mean, we sell it in. Is it better for people to go to an actual bookshop rather than sort of Amazon?
Amazon's
make
probably
more
the
money
best.
on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the people ask me that too. The royalty thing is they have ways of leveling it out, believe it or not. Like so for example, Amazon, of course, has discount prices, so they charge less for the book. But because of that, and this is really like behind the scenes stuff, but because of that, the royalty rate is higher for a book sold on Amazon. What that means is like the royalty percentage. So I will make the same amount of royalties whether you buy it from Amazon or whether you buy it from your local bookstore. So
good. We wanted to make sure. That's right. Yeah. We just wanted to make sure that you get as much money as possible for the work that you've put into this. Again, fantastically written, amazingly researched book. People are getting a fantastic book for their buck. So go out and get that. It's out in the UK. Again, Amazon are delivering it sort of 4th or 5th of November if you go on there. And when the audiobook comes out, it will be read by Mr. Solomon himself. So
that's right.
Again, Brian, mate, really appreciate having you on. It's a pleasure every single time we have you on here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, guys. I always love coming on here to talk about stuff with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. We are but two jabronis. We feel like, doing this thing for however long we've done, to have guys like you come on, like I say, legitimate broadcast journalist coming onto the show, we are absolutely blessed. So we thank you so much, man.
You're very welcome.
See you soon, bro. Thanks.
All right. Much. Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right. So that was Brian R. Solomon. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us the absolute best of the book there. Irresistible Force, The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. What a book that is. And we cannot sell it enough. You guys need to go out and check it out yourselves. Like we've said, it will be available on Amazon and all your favorite bookstores, and probably some bad ones too. So yeah, go and check it out.
In the UK, get down to Waterstones. It'll be in Waterstones.
It'll be on the high street.
It'll be on the high street. It'll be high street. It'll be down there, man.
So I mean, for anyone that's watched this, thank you so much for checking this out. Please do subscribe on YouTube if you are watching this on there. If you're watching it on Facebook, which is where I'm hoping to upload this as well, please do give us a like, follow, or a comment, or anything like that. We love you guys too over on Facebook. 13,000, is it?
13,000 people can't be wrong, baby.
They can't be wrong. They can't be wrong.
Be wrong.
Yes. Apologies. My voice is absolutely shocking is for this episode. I don't know if you can hear it that well. I hope
You're
you
good,
can.
baby. You're sounding good, baby. You're sounding good. But again, we just for a couple of guys, we do this
What
for
a
the
guest!
pure love
What
of
a
the
great
game.
guest!
Absolutely phenomenal guest. Brian R. Solomon is legit, bro. He is the best of the best. He is as
Proper.
He's proper. He's as entwined into the wrestling business as you can be. Like he said, that a lot of the guys and people that he has on his podcast are friends of his. That he'll just ping them a text message and say, "Oh, do you want to come on?" And some of the guests he has on, all of them have just been phenomenal. So check that out. Shut Up and Wrestle. Buy this book, Irresistible Force, Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. Again, his other books about the original Sheik. Fantastic book. We had him on speaking about that as well.
Yeah.
And what can we say apart from thank you? We've enjoyed it. We always love it when Brian comes on and people of that sort of ilk, real journalists, legitimate,
real proper,
real authors,
journalism. Yeah, no,
real
we really do appreciate the time he gives us, because again, it's his own time. And
absolutely.
Stay tuned, because I'm sure at some point the video that we recorded over a week ago will get put out.
Yes, we're on it. Don't worry, it's in production.
I have been asked once or twice at least, when we're going live again. They will come back soon. We have something we have talked about, but we got to get in the right position for the live shows again.
Right.
We've got plenty of other things coming up, including watch-alongs and all that. So don't panic. We have got plenty to come. So
we've got plenty to come. We want to do bits of everything. We've got the watch-alongs. We want to do some more lives. But when a guest like Brian R. Solomon is ready to come onto your show, you drop everything. Even my main man JB is feeling like absolute dog crap at the moment. But he was like, "No, this is Brian R. Solomon. We're talking about Gorilla Monsoon."
Yeah,
he's lem-sipped up. He's there. He's ready.
Lemsip Pepsi, mate. Pepsi is the one. Pepsi, medicinal Pepsi. That's what I'm doing.
Medicinal Pepsi.
So yes, thank you to everyone that's stuck around, that's still watching, still listening, all that. We appreciate it. Give us the 5 stars on the listening devices.
Do it.
Yeah. Special shout out at the end of this. I figured I'd do this now. Special shout out to Elijah in Australia. We know you listen to us. We know you love it. We know you really love your wrestling. His favorite wrestler at the minute is Penta.
Oh,
I mean, yeah. So shout out to you, little man. We hope you're doing all right. Guys, I'm JB. Next to me, the best Chris in all of wrestling podcast, Mr. Chris Dredd. Thank you to Brian R. Solomon for joining us. Take care. We'll see you next time.